So that idea that leaders need to be visionaries, they need to be out the front, they need to have all the answers, they need to be very certain, is still very pervasive in organisations, in political and public life. And yet there's a lot of research that tells us that that model of leadership is not really effective in most contexts anymore, even if it ever really was. What we now, look for in organisations is leaders who are highly attuned to, what the needs of the organisation are, leaders who have the capacity to step back and see the bigger picture, or get on the balcony and understand what's really going on in the organisation. But it is the case that when women in particular want to try and do leadership that's not that heroic model, they often come up against all sorts of stereotypes and comments like, is she really tough enough for the top job? Will she be able to deliver the kind of hours that we need somebody in that role to deliver? So it's really quite a tricky process of navigation for women, because they're working against these very, very powerful embedded archetypes, if you like, about what leadership looks like. And in their very, in their very gender and the way they look, they often go against those stereotypes. So a big part of the challenge is to kind of support women to pioneer their own path to leadership. To feel as though they can bring more of their whole self in the way they do leadership, rather than go into camouflage or feel as though they've got some kind of ideal about what leadership looks like that they've got to conform to. So leadership as an idea is a very powerful notion, and in spite of a great deal of research that now tells us that the model of the single visionary heroic individual leading from the front and instructing the troops coming behind, even though a lot of research tells us that that's a very ineffective model for most organisational contexts. It's even an ineffective model for military contexts nowadays, which is where it's originally come from. But when people try and depart from that model, they still encounter a lot of obstacles. When women in particular, but also men trying to do leadership differently with more kind of humanity and sometimes admitting their vulnerability and pursuing a more authentic path to leadership, they still find that there's a lot of stereotypes about how they should be. So there is pressure on them to be the tough individual who can, work long hours, who needs to camouflage their sense of, themselves as women. There's still a lot of pressure on women to camouflage those things. So, part of our work in supporting women to find paths to leadership is about helping them navigate that path in ways that feel authentic and true to themselves and their values, their purposes. But that often involves being quite courageous and pushing back on pressures to conform, on giving themselves the right to have a work-life balance, on allowing themselves space to relax and be whole people and have lives outside of work and so on. That's part of supporting women to find different paths to leadership. So one of the areas that I've been doing quite a lot of work in over the last few years has been this notion of mindfulness and mindful leadership. And mindfulness is really about being truly present in the moment without judgment. And what we argue and have developed on the basis of quite a lot of good research now is this idea that putting a value in leadership on the present, on being able to listen deeply, on being really still in your leadership is going to open all sorts of paths and new ways forward. So while the heroic model, the traditional model, if you like, values action, it puts a value on getting outcomes and on the future, what we've found is that helping people actually put a value on the present moment, on being right here now, on being still and on listening deeply, actually supports us to do the leadership work better. So it doesn't mean that things don't get done. It simply means that the right things get done in a focused, powerful and effective way. So, one of the parts to that we find is that, most people are doing very complex jobs. There's a great deal of pressure on them. They've got long to-do lists. But they get caught up in habits of excessive thinking and and ways of thinking that induce sort of more stress for themselves and for others. So helping them get mindful to step back from situations, to work out what really matters, to let go of things that don't matter so much, are all very, very valuable skills that can be introduced into leadership to help people not only be more authentic and be more present to what's going on, it also enables them to be happier and less stressed and to find more, joy and fulfilment in their leadership work.